Hey, welcome back to the Speed Strength Summit. Hey, I am honored. It's your host, Coach Bricks. I am honored to be on once again with another guy in this profession that definitely delivers every single time. Whether they're presenting, whether they're training their athletes, getting them ready for whatever competition, combine, whatever, he definitely does it. And this gentleman's out of Chantilly, Virginia, where he has his training center by way, I should say, Miami, Florida. That's where he's from. Came on up here to the cold. I don't know why he did, but he did come up here, to the cold in the winter to help many athletes out. He's a great repertoire of athletes that he has out there right now in the NFL and continues to work with many different athletes. So without further ado, Coach Kavanaugh, how are you tonight, man?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure, man. I greatly appreciate you taking the time. I know, somewhat about your background and stuff like that and, where you started and what you've done. But I would like you to, fill us in, fill the audience in, the other strength coaches, the other sports coaches out there that are listening in on this summit, where you started, how you got into the profession to begin with.
Well, I'm going to try to keep this short. So, born and raised in Miami, like you said. I don't know how I ended up in, Northern Virginia in the cold, but I did. So I was a 5-sport athlete down there and played my college ball up in the Carolinas areas. And, I really enjoyed sport growing up. I was lucky enough to have some really good mentors and some people that have helped me along the way. And, early on in my career, I was kind of forced into the field, unlike a lot of other people. Some people knew what they wanted to do. I always knew I wanted to coach. And I come more from the sport coaching background than from the strength side or speed side. And I ended up kind of falling into that role. I'll tell you a quick story on how I got into the true coaching profession, so to speak, was one of my athletes and was a kid that I trained with. We worked out together, a group of us down in Miami. We always worked out with a good group of guys. And he was getting ready for the NFL draft. He had a lot of success in college. I was still playing in high school at the time. And he comes up to me. He's like, "Kavanaugh, you're training me." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean? I train with you." And he goes, "Well, I trust you. And, hopefully you can help me out," basically. And so I had to kind of fake it till you make it, which is something I don't necessarily recommend to a lot of people. But going through that process allowed me to learn a lot. But I learned first and foremost, the most important part of the process as a coach to athlete is the relationship, and the relationship built upon trust. So, as coaches in our field, we always present a very good resume. We show everybody is, bigger, taller, faster, maybe had a little bit more accolades than what we were when we were in high school or in college, or even, some of us have been able to reach to the pros. But what I realized is, when you're working with guys that are older than you when you first got started, it kind of humbles you quickly. And you got to be like, okay, I just got to do everything I can to learn as much as I can as fast as possible. So what I did early on in my career is I reached out to a number of people and was lucky enough to be around some really good coaches and help the athletes that I had at the moment. And when I had gone through my career as an athlete, I fell through a roof, broke my back, ended my career. And basically that changed my entire scope of the way I viewed sport and the way I viewed training. So up until that point, we got after it. We were pretty, rough and tough and mean and a little more old school than I would say scientific or even intelligent. But that gave me a lot of lessons. See, when I got hurt, L5, L4, T1, completely cracked, multiple bulge disc, and that really kind of affected me in the way I was able to coach. See, what it did is it limited my athletic ability, and that forced me to be a better coach. See, early on in my coaching days, I was able to, demo very easily, and I learned that good demo coaches become very good coaches. So I was able to move well, and I was able to show that I was strong enough to earn respect. But what happened when I got hurt was I wasn't able to do that anymore. So I had to learn exactly what was in the athlete's mind and how to correlate that drill in a cueing way to get them to do what I needed them to do. I could no longer just jump on the box. Initially it was, "Hey, I want you to do this." And, "Well, I can't do that, coach." Like this. And I just did it. And then, when you get hurt and you can't move and you can't walk and you basically, almost, change the way your own image is, you're able to now help other athletes with their evolution as an athlete and go through that journey. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of how I became a coach. Fast forward to where I am today in Northern Virginia. We've kind of built our reputation working with elite level football players, helping them get to the NFL Combine and the NFL draft process. And we've had a lot of success. Been doing that for over a decade, and I've had multiple records with our athletes. And it's interesting because we might only get one or two traditionally fast guys from a genetic potential standpoint. There might be only a few DBs in the group or a few wide receivers that are able to move well. And sure enough, we're always able to have some really good numbers. And we've kind of built a niche for guys that are coming out in the third round and below, just because when I was in Miami, it was really easy to sell a kid, hey, come down to the beach. You're from Wisconsin, Nebraska, you play at Purdue, you play at Ohio State, come down to the beach. It's 92 degrees, and I could literally hit a 9-iron, hit the beach in the water. So that made it really easy. Coming up to Northern Virginia, that made it a little bit harder sell for some of these college kids coming out. So got to get kind of figure out what our niche is, and our niche right now has been working with guys that are third round and below, that if they don't put the work in, their draft stock's going to suffer. So, we need guys that want to come in here and work. For early part of my career, I had a lot of guys that they could get by if I didn't do a great job. I had to basically not screw them up because they were going to go first round, second round, third round. And no matter what I did, as long as I didn't hurt them, they were going to make some pretty good money in the draft.
Yeah, and how did you get into that combine stuff? You mentioned that your buddy, said, hey, you're going to train me and stuff like that. But was that really a big passion of yours? Or was it, just another part of performance, but you really fell in love with this part?
Well, I mean, performance in football was always a passion. I grew up, I was a track athlete, played football, I wrestled, so I enjoyed the training part of it. But the combine was always extremely intriguing to me because it basically took these guys that might have good instincts or they're gamers or they have all their qualities, and then it forced them into a track event. See, the combine, it's a meat market. It's a visual test. It's an intellectual test. They're going to want to see where you are. It's an EQ test. They're going to want to see what you're like as a person. Do you fit with the culture of the team? Because at that level, those guys are already in the 1%. And then it became down to these physical qualities. Can they kind of figure out if you how do you match up, all things being equal? And it basically that was pretty intriguing to me because it was like, okay, well, now you might be a good football player, but if you don't prepare, it forced really talented athletes, very gifted, high performers into a model that was more based upon, training than it was based upon, genetic gifts. And through that mechanism and the money that was on the table as the driver for some of these guys, it helped me be excited about working with kids that know that this is a difference maker. Because a lot of times you were getting athletes that they knew that they were going to make it. They knew that, they could go out there and run 4.5s any given day. And that's hard to do. And we had a big joke on, this summer with a kid that think he runs a 4.3 and a 4.4, and that didn't work out so well for him. But what ended up happening with the combine is it motivated college-level guys that knew they were going to make a lot of money to make even more money because it put their money where their mouth is. They had to basically go show up. And it put the scouts' money where their mouth was. It basically forced scouts to own up on decisions. See, the NFL Combine started not from a 40-yard dash or anything else, but it was basically an opportunity to bring a group of these guys that were draft eligible into a room and get medicals on them to find out if they were healthy. So I became really intrigued with the idea of taking somebody that was maybe a genetic freak and had really good instincts and a good sport player and turn them into a track star and get them ready almost for a bodybuilding type competition or a track meet, so to speak.
Excellent. And I think you've done, like I said, a phenomenal job doing that stuff, getting these athletes ready and getting them in. Now I want to go over, how you set up your day. How do you set up a combine? Like you said, these athletes are coming to you. Your number one thing is, they got to be as healthy as possible. They got to be at top performance, and they got to be peaking right at that time, whether it's, for the combine or for the pro day, right then. You get them sometimes late December, always, beginning of January. You have probably all your guys in around that time. What does a typical day and then your typical program over that 2-3 month period look like?
Yeah. So, it's interesting you mentioned when we get the guys. It does change. So some guys are still in bowl games as they go into even January. So it does adjust a little bit. Unfortunately, the guys that are in bowl games are at a higher level. And I say unfortunately because we get less time to work with them. And those guys are the ones that everyone's watching to say, okay, you did a good job or you didn't. The guys that come into you a little earlier, you have a little bit more time to prepare, but that's often because at the college level they didn't do so well, or at least on the team standpoint. But, like you said, the first thing is making sure the athletes are healthy. So what we do is we're taking inventory every single day. We use a system called Fusionetics. It runs them through a bunch of kind of daily readiness questionnaires, and also we're getting an idea from their nutritional intake, their supplement intake. That's the first thing that we're doing, for the athletes kind of walking through the door. But really, the day starts way before that. See, the planning for these athletes start all the way back down to when they were even in high school, and even some of them in the middle school age, where we're doing medicals on them and we're going way back and we're kind of unraveling this onion physically with them, and we're basically going through old data from their medical records. A lot of these athletes don't want to expose to the agents or to their scouts maybe some of their injuries, so we have to really say, hey, first and foremost, you need to be honest with us of what's going on so we can help you, because we know two things, right? If there's an injury, the athlete's not going to perform that well. And also, as coaches, we have a coach's eye so we can see the injury potentially, even if they say it's then we can actually find out what he thinks is the injury and maybe evaluate it and look at what maybe is the cause of the problem also. If it wasn't some sort of a acute or chronic issue or something if it's a chronic issue, we kind of unravel the onion a little bit and go underneath layers. But if it's something that happened and, we could see it on video because it was an injury in sport, it's a little different. So we're going way back to even their medical records and see kind of what's going on. So the first thing is that medical evaluation. After that, on a day-to-day basis, it's taking inventory of how they feel that day and what they did the day before and what their rest was like, and kind of what their goals are for their day. Not just what our goals are, but what their goals are, because every athlete, I learned this in fighting. We might show up with the mentality that, hey, we're going to kick some butt today, or we might show up with the mentality that, hey, I just want to kind of roll around and just kind of break a sweat, but I don't really want to work too hard. But that guy coming against you may have a different agenda. So, you got to kind of, check yourself. Athletes have that same feeling is, hey, they might come into the workout thinking that they just want to take it easy, and we're planning a hard day. So we have to kind of adjust to them a little bit. And so when we take inventory, we're going basically, mentally and physically. And on the physical side, it's kind of easy because we could kind of control everything in our environment. We have a private chef. We have, doctors in-house. We have in-house physical therapists. We have our Marriott hotel right across the street. So, we're able to control the entire environment. And because of that, we know we can kind of control the rest, which means I can manage their stress. So when you control somebody's rest, you can manage their stress a lot better. And so that's the first thing. When we come in, our program is broken up into 8 segments, and basically you could put as much effort into each one of those areas as needed for whatever athlete that you have based upon the athlete's goals. But to kind of break it down for you, we bring the athlete in, and the first thing that we're going to do is soft tissue work. I'm a big believer that, if you could put your hands on somebody, that's going to be a bigger impact than maybe a stiff lacrosse ball or foam roller. It's going to help you out a little bit and a lot than maybe doing nothing. But it's not going to be as impactful to the athlete as a professional's hands. So we do a lot of soft tissue work before the athlete even gets started. And then we're going to work into, a static stretching. So I know it's old school in a lot of people's mentality, but I believe that static stretching is extremely healthy. I've seen a ton of athletes in our building, but also from my own education of being on the track side, if the fastest athletes in the world that we just saw in the Olympics are sitting there stretching their hamstrings and holding drills for, 50 seconds to 2 minutes, then why aren't football players? Because football athletes are definitely tighter than sprinters. they have more injuries than most sprinters, and they're definitely not as fast as sprinters. So once we figure out that correlation, I think it's okay to stretch. So after we're done with stretching, we're going to do what we call as our control drills. I picked this up from Ian King a long time ago, and it's been a huge impact in our building. I think these warm-ups that everybody are doing are circuits for like upper body and lower body, or for the low back, that might be like prerequisites to their training, sometimes get lost by them doing it too much. And you could get a huge impact on what you do in the training center if you just focus on the intent of the exercise. So our control drills, they're short, but they're very intentful. They're going to be focused, and they're going to be very controlled. That's why we call them control drills. And they're not supposed to be taking up a large portion of the training session. They're supposed to focus on either the weak links of the athlete or what the athlete's about to get prepared for. And by doing that, it gets them ready for our next drill, which is our core. And we do core first. And we believe that it puts the athlete in a better position to create a neutral hip position to drive out in acceleration and in top speed. See, if we know that most athletes are in anterior pelvic tilt, and by taking the abdominals and driving it up, we're going to then create that flexion that's going to put that pelvis in a more neutral position. That neutral position is going to allow for a higher knee position, which is going to create for more force into the ground. So when I was taught that, I had this light bulb that went on and said, well, that could definitely help our sprinters. Then I need to change the way we're doing our core training, because we used to do it always at the end. And that was a big eye-opener for me, because that was probably the last 2 years of our training, and it has made a big impact this year. I could tell you that just by the way our athletes feel, but even more so, not only how our athletes feel, but you can see the performance, because we measure everything in here. We're measuring our warm-ups, we're measuring our 10s, we're measuring our 20s, we're measuring all of the things that we do in the building from a combine standpoint. And I'm a big believer, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And if you can't manage it, it's bound to not be a bad result. It's bound to be an injury, which is by far the worst case. So after we do our core work, we're then going to move into our speed development stuff. And we do, so we don't have like a section for warm-up. We believe the warm-up is going to be tailored to whatever the drill is that day. That doesn't mean we don't do general, warm-up phases. So we're going to have pretty much the same consistent warm-up every single day, but it's in this section of speed development, because we're trying to build in these basic motor patterns with all of these athletes. It's amazing. These college guys come from 4 years of training. They don't have a strong strength base, but because they've had so many injuries and they've had to fight through it, their movement patterns are so off. They don't know how to move properly. So we have to kind of almost re-educate them like they're a 13, 14-year-old kid going through basically puberty and coordination drills. So we have to re-educate them there. And then we could start adding in the fun stuff, which is the high-level speed work, and then the plyometrics, which is our next section. After we do our plyo work, we're going to go into some strength stuff. People are surprised when they come into our building, because we produce some really strong athletes, both at the college and at the professional level. Even at the high school level, our guys are very strong. I've had 50 squatters at the high school level, and these guys are, strong as shit, frankly. But they don't really lift that much heavy weight in this building, because we understand that the risk-reward ratio is just not there. And it's a very important thing for me, obviously from a liability standpoint, but also thinking like long-term developmental. If an athlete gets hurt, what does that say about your program? You broke the first rule in coaching, which is do no harm. So if you hurt somebody, that's a problem. And putting a bar on an athlete's back is just going to expose them. When you put maximal loads on somebody, it's going to expose them. When you do high velocity work, it's going to expose the athlete. So people are very surprised in our NFL combine training program how lightweight our athletes lift. But the intent of the lift and the controlled movements and the idea of them focusing during their exercise, to me, is more important than the load itself. Now, I do care about the load and I care about the velocity of that movement, but I care more importantly about how that load is being moved, because we take that approach of position, pattern, power. And if you lose posture, in any of those movements, you're going to lose power, but you're going to jeopardize the health of the athlete. So we don't load them that heavy. We don't back squat any of our athletes during the combine program. That's been a rule because a lot of guys like doing that, and I just don't do it. I would say the one exception is for linemen that need to put on weight. There really hasn't been an exercise that I've found to put as much mass on the athlete than back squat. And you could trap bar deadlift, you could front squat, but the structural setup of our spine is meant for vertical loading. So I wouldn't do it if the athlete's not prepared. But at this point, if we need to kind of force the athlete into results, then we got to do what we have to do, because if he doesn't gain that weight, there's no chance for him to even make that roster spot or even get looked at. So it's important for us to manage whatever the expectation is of the athlete and the agent, which is tough to do. So after that strength phase, we kind of put the athlete into conditioning, and this is where it kind of gets funny for the combine guys versus our long-term development athletes. Is the athlete doesn't necessarily need to be conditioned for the combine test in the way that we think of football conditioning. But during their pro day, they're working their athletes hard. The athlete might only get 10 to 15 minutes, and every single scout that's there has their eyes on them. So they're going to run them through drills with no rest, and it's going to be whatever drill they want. So they're going to work that kid out. They're going to make them break a sweat and basically gas out. And what you can't really prepare for is this adrenaline rush that these athletes have at pro day, because all the lights are on them. I mean, it's a very different relationship to sport than they have for football for the combine, because all eyes are on one person. It's not a collective unit working together for an overall goal. It's one person showcasing to everybody what he's capable on the athletic side. So there's a lot more pressure. There's a lot more anxiety. There's things that these athletes aren't used to dealing with. So during the conditioning phases of our combine prep, we basically kind of just shoot at them, basically. And what I mean by that is we're gonna throw things at them that they're really not ready for. So if that is, hey, if an athlete got in trouble in college for doing something stupid, let's say they were out drinking and they got they got a ticket, or there are a lot of guys are smoking, they're doing dumb stuff, so they got popped for a test. Or an athlete had an injury and he lied about it, or he screwed up on a test or something like that. These are like long-term issues that you have to deal with on the psychological level. And as coaches, it's our job to kind of get the most out of them, but not necessarily be their medical therapist or doctor, but to be there and understand how to consult with them. So these things are going on in their minds. So from a conditioning standpoint, we try to kind of get them out of the training state right away and then throw them back in it. We do that obviously at the end, because I don't want to do that in the beginning and then just kind of mess up their mindset. So the conditioning is almost driven by kind of messing them up a little bit, because that's what's going to happen at pro day. And then kind of can they do their technique that we taught them in the beginning, because we believe in doing skill first, that they're doing after they're tired or after they're mentally got drained from dealing with that conversation that maybe was unpleasant. And that that's like a collection of the entire workout. But because we have our athletes for maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and we own their time, so like there's no social time. Most of these kids don't live here; they're flying from all across the country. What we do is we kind of break that up into segments throughout the week of where they need to work. And during that week, we might have an emphasis on the 40 start. During that week, we might have an emphasis on their cut for their shuttle, and then we just kind of break that down based upon what the athlete's needs are over the course of that 8 weeks. By the time they're in their combine, they're so fine-tuned, they're ready to go. So that kind of is the training component, and just kind of like an accordion, if one athlete needs more strength work than the other athlete, then we just kind of bring that section out a little bit. If the athlete needs more speed work or more reaction stuff, we bring that out a little bit, spend more time there. And then by the end of the 8 weeks, we kind of hopefully get them all into this little box that they could go out and perform for their 30-minute show, at their combine or pro day.
Yeah, and how do you take an athlete that, you have so many athletes that come in? Well, what do you have? Sometimes 8, 10 that come in around the same time.
We take anywhere from 12 to 20. We never go over 20.
Okay.
It's been kind of my goal since I moved out of Miami to up here. I've worked in programs where we've had 40, 60 guys. Some of the biggest names in the business. We are one of the top 5 combine programs, and we're very proud of that. But I think one of the reasons why we are a top program is because we take a small group, because I can actually give quality coaching to everybody. So I'm actually coaching. I'm not just telling a bunch of interns what to do. And I think that happens at a lot of programs because it's just manpower. You got to spread that across, 110 guys. It's hard to coach the entire football team. Let alone, you bring all these guys from so many different football teams and you create your own team. You're doing a lot in 8 weeks. So I would rather have a small group. So we have basically anywhere from 12 to 20.
Now, do they all come in at the same time? So, like, everybody starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. You do segment them what time they come in?
Most of the time they're all in the same group. We do break them up into, to 2 groups sometimes. And that's mainly from managing their rest and stress. So if an athlete, they respond better to workouts later at night, we're going to start them off in that phase, but then we're going to transition them down to getting them ready for whatever their pro day time is. So, a lot of these pro days are at 8 in the morning. So that means the athlete needs to show up at least an hour ahead of time just to kind of fill out paperwork, maybe Wonderlic test or just their physical or some of the paperwork for the scouts that are there. More often than not, the Wonderlic is going to be done at the end of their event, their combine or pro day. And that's something that's interesting to even think about, is that if it's done at the end, well, that's after they're all tired and they're done, doing a bunch of interviews. So what's on their athlete's mind then? They're trying to check out. So that's when they test them intellectually. So, it's something that we do got to train and think about. But we try to actually cater to the training time based upon what is the best response to that athlete's body and their rest cycle, as well as and then taper them to when their event is for their pro day or combine. Because it's pretty structured. Most of this information is going to be out at least 4 to 6 weeks, and we manage that with the strength coach at the college level, which I will say is probably one of the rare things that we do that a lot of programs don't. So I have a lot of friends that are college strength coaches that give me guys, and I feel like it would be rude or disrespectful to not consult with them about, what that athlete has been doing for the last 4 years and when your pro day is and what your expectation is of the athlete that you've let me borrow, frankly, because he had him for 4, maybe 5 years. I'm getting him for maybe 6 to 8 weeks. So I always consult with them about what their pro day structure is, their schedule, and what's the expectations of that athlete's time requirements. See, some coaches and some teams want them to do media stuff because it's good for their program, since they could then market them at the NCAA level, which they couldn't do while they were in school. But that is maybe not fair to the athlete, but it's what they're doing to kind of benefit the program. So it's important for me to kind of get in tune with the college coach to see what they're doing. And then I kind of organize the training cycle based upon, what's best for the athlete and their structure.
That's excellent stuff, because I think that's very, very important for new, up-and-coming strength coaches who want to get into this stuff. How do you really structure these guys? You're talking about that. And, one of the things that, I've talked to other strength coaches about, and it's probably the big thing that's probably going on, I think, in the industry right now, is rest and recovery.
Yeah. That's the most important thing. I mean, at the end of the day, right, I believe that you can stress the shit out of the athlete. You could put a lot of stress on them, and the bodies actually manage that really well. Just look at the Navy SEALs, look at fighters, look at guys that are firefighters, police officers. During a time of stress, your body responds in such an amazing way. I think what we don't think about sometimes is these athletes have been stressed for 4 to 5 years nonstop, because the football season is extremely stressful. And then they go into the off season and the coaches beats them up some more. And then these kids don't have, summers like we thought we did when we were playing, or like a lot of our high school guys where they get a summer off. These guys are in school year round, and they're constantly being stressed. Not on top of that, they're being stressed. They're being stretched intellectually, and then they're also being stressed socially, because you're taking them out of their environment. A lot of people are pulling out these kids because they're about to be millionaires. I mean, minimum wage, is almost $500,000. It's $420,000. In 2015, 2016, bumped up a little bit. So, I mean, they come out, they're making almost $500,000. There's a lot of people in their family and their friends and their circle that are stressing on them. So if we don't manage that, then we're going to be in some trouble. I go as far as managing their relationships a little bit. I don't want to be Dr. Phil or anything like that, but I do want to make sure our athletes are aren't getting stressed in an area that they shouldn't be. So, a couple of years ago, I was a jerk. I was a big jerk. Our athletes used to live in our pro housing, and we used to be able to shut the Wi-Fi off at like 10 o'clock. And if you want to talk about, making sure kids get rest and focus, that's the easiest way to do it. You shut the Wi-Fi off, they run through their data in their first 3 days, 4 days. Their parents call them or their agent says, hey, I ain't paying for that bill. That's ridiculous. They get, they're going to go to sleep and shut down, but they also get pretty pissed off and grumpy. So I decided to kind of back off on that and then educate them a little bit, because I feel that, that does a better job of getting to the end goal, is educating them on what we need. So we do help with recovery. What we do in this building from a rest and recovery standpoint is very important. And I believe these are things that high school coaches, college coaches, and private facilities could be doing for their athletes as well. I mean, we have a recovery pump, Normatex. We have game readies. We have, massage therapists in here. We have, a cryo chamber 2 minutes away. So we're very lucky to have that stuff in the building. Hot tubs, cold tubs, saunas. So, those things we're very fortunate because of our state-of-the-art facility. But there's things that you could do that are going to make a big impact on the athlete's recovery. And you got to start with the basic ones, which is making sure they have that rest block in order. So if you can get your athletes to go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, you're able to kind of manage their sleep cycles a lot better. And same thing with their eating patterns. If you can get them to, eat their 3 square meals a day, and then maybe some performance meals around there based upon, peri-workout nutrition, post-workout nutrition, whatever whatever your philosophy is on the nutrition or supplementation side, if you can get them to do that more regularly and consistent with that schedule that you set up for them, then you're able to manage it better. Because if one thing's off, then you're going to know what that is. But if you do 20 things and you do them at different times, you're never going to be able to manage what that recovery is, because you don't know where that stress is coming from. So that's some of the stuff that we do. We also do just kind of like mental sessions. So I send guys to, yoga, Pilates, and those instructors have a little bit more holistic view of the body, but more so the mind. I have a very holistic view of the performance side. They have a little bit more, overarching view of what, the psychology of training does for the athlete. So they help them with a lot of breathing. They help them with kind of just mentally walking them through that training. And we lean on those people because they're experts in those fields to give our athletes a little bit of a kind of a cool down, both mentally and physically. And we see huge performance outcomes afterwards, because the athlete then buys in to some of the other drills, moving forward. So I feel like, rest and recovery and the restoration of some of the stress that we're putting on the athlete is such an important factor. And you could do these things in your programs, no matter where you are and no matter what your budget is. I mean, if you think about it, I'm from South Florida. It's garbage cans, ice, and water. That's a 20,000 ice bucket. That's all it is. It costs you $20 at Home Depot. And people want to use technology to sell. People want to use technology sometimes as a hurdle because they say it's too expensive. There's workarounds, and you just got to figure out what that is for your program, and then input that into your system as wherever it needs to be.
Excellent. How often do you have your athletes, your combine athletes, come in per week? Do you give them off days, or do you pretty much keep them occupied so they're staying out of trouble?
It's 6-7 days.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I would say it's definitely, the grind. It's a hustle time. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a grind. Because, I mean, a grind is when you're putting the same day in, same work day in and out. It's the bring your lunch bill. It's the blue collar mentality. These guys are about to make $500,000 for playing a freaking game. If they don't want to come to work, we have a problem. See, the program's not motivational. So, I don't have to worry about that stuff. So I could basically own their schedule from now till pro day or combine or tryouts, because they understand that the athletes that are in the program that put the time in are going to get a better result than the athletes that, just kind of half-ass it. And that's one of the reasons why we started focusing on guys that are projected in the third round and below, because we can take a third rounder and make them a second and first rounder. That's the difference between, not $100,000 contract, but, a bonus, but millions of dollars. So if I need to motivate them to come in every day, then I'm doing something wrong, or they got their priorities, all out of whack. So I do take them in, probably I would say consistently over the program 6 days a week, but 7 days we're going to be with them. we do a lot of stuff outside of the building as well, just to kind of get them to kind of relax around us. I would say I'm a stressful guy to be around, 24/7. You could talk to the wife and she'll admit to that. But I think that from an athlete coach standpoint, you got to get outside of the building sometime to get the results that you need inside the facility. And I say that with football coaches. The best team building is done during conditioning because it's tough and it's not fun, and it's done maybe at the beach, playing volleyball because it's a very team bonding experience. Or it's even like we do Madden tournaments here, with our guys, and we place bets and stuff, and we have a lot of fun. By doing that, I could get the most out of them in there. And I feel that is, in my opinion, some of the best ways to get through to the athlete is kind of going outside, playing some games, taking the stress out. Because these guys are competitive. So, we play laser tag right down the street, and I have to kind of like, hey, let's not play laser tag again because these guys are like jumping over like rocks and shit. And I'm like, I thought this was going to be fun. It turned out their freaking Omega Wave score just kind of tanked because their nervous system went through the roof, and it just drains them. So we have to be very smart about that. But I do believe that at any level that you're in as a coach, it's your job to kind of get outside of your, coaching box to get the most out of whatever you have in your bucket.
I think that's great. I think that's the difference between, I've talked to other trainers as well, I should say other coaches as well, and that's the difference between a coach and a trainer.
Absolutely.
They go outside.
Just to find it.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. And I think that's what many, many young strength coaches need to understand. There's a huge difference between a trainer and a coach. And you just nailed it right there, being able to reach them outside of the performance, the training aspect of it, which is right on. I like to ask this of people who definitely have been in this profession for a little while. What's some advice you have for a young coach, a young strength coach out there, looking to break in, trying to make his mark in this profession? What should they really focus on when they're coming out?
Well, as much as I look at, I still like to think that I am a young coach too, because I got a lot to learn. Man, I'd say the first thing is you got some great books out there. There's a lot of resources. There's a lot of certifications that will really educate you on some of the science. There's a lot of seminars and conferences, and even some documents that will educate you on the ability to articulate your message to athletes and get the most out of them. It's just not going to happen unless you're actually training people. You're never going to be able to understand people, from a one-on-one standpoint and a large group standpoint, to kind of isolate maybe the one person that's got a problem going on outside of the gym, and that's what's making him suffer in his training if you're not working with people. So my advice to young coaches is to start coaching. And whatever level that is. I mean, everybody wants to work with the pro athletes, obviously. I got lucky. I still think I am lucky. But you could start with that pro athlete, but then what ends up happening is you don't have some of the education that I wish I maybe had, of maybe taking somebody that wasn't as gifted physically and working with them all the way up. Because, some of my first athletes I worked with was, jumping 40 inches was normal. Running 4.5s was a bad day. And, like now, parents ask me sometimes, what can I do to help my athletes, help my kid go to college, and I say, well, give him more books, because that might be the only way he's going to go there. He's got to read. So, I think reading is important, but you have to coach, you have to do, because all of us aren't going to be able to work with the elite level guy. And even then, I don't know if it's fair, experience, because you're going to learn things from every athlete and in every layperson as well, from whether it be general population fitness side of things. You're going to learn a lot there as well. But my advice is to get out there and coach. The second thing I would tell you is you cannot be the coach of everything. You cannot be the best nutritional coach. You cannot be the best supplement guy for your athletes. You cannot be the best yoga instructor, to your athletes. You cannot be the best speed coach, strength coach, conditioning coach, sport coach, mental coach. If you think that you are that guy, you're not going to be able to do any of those things really well. So I've really built a niche for guys that need to have a fast 40. And it's interesting because, obviously I've never ran as fast as some of the athletes I have. I mean, Devin Fuller ran a 4.34 this year, 4.3, low 4.3s even in laser, believe that. And for the 115 scouts, I could never run that fast. And I was able to, get that kid because his agent had worked with had DJ Coles, who I had who came in running a 4.6 and, ran a 4.3 at his pro day. So, we have a collection of these 4.3s and 4.2s and 4.4s. And, frankly, I couldn't do that if I was trying to do everything with my athletes. So I bring in some guys that are phenomenal. Scott Paltos came in and talked, bench with our guys. And we're bringing a bunch of guys in this year as well, And I feel like by doing that, by bringing in some of the best people in the industry into one building, I could really kind of own the entire process for the guys as kind of like a head coach of a football, combine program, and just kind of like a chess move people around as they are needed instead of trying to be everything to everyone. And I think that's the thing is find good mentors, find good coaches, and look up to them and do what they're doing. Don't just go to one seminar and then leave, do what that person's program is that you read and not reach back out to them. I just find it unbelievable that I've seen people that will go outside of a conference, buy the book of the presenter speaking, read the book, but not walk inside and just ask him a question. So it just baffles my mind. I just don't understand it. I was lucky enough to go up to J.L. Holdsworth's place up in Ohio, spent a lot of time with him, learned a ton, and I got to meet some great people. Literally I was like, hey, Eric Serrano came in from out of town, is probably one of the best nutritional, doctors I've ever met in our industry. And I'm like, hey, you've been telling me I need to get to see you for a few years now. We caught up last year. He's like, come to the house. So I spent right before my flight. I was almost missed the flight. Drove over there, stayed freaking an hour in his basement, talking everything from training to nutrition to supplementation. And it's people like that. Those people are willing to help you. It's just that coaches aren't willing to learn, and since they're not open-minded, they lose those opportunities. So I would say the first thing is you got to get in the trenches and coach. And the second thing is you got to reach out to the right people and start learning from them.
I 100% agree with you. I think that's one of the best things. And, that's why I'm trying to put on this summit so people can get out and reach out to guys like yourself that understand, that have a different kind of mindset and what you're learning. You know what I mean? Hey, boom, take something from here, take something from there, and then build their own repertoire, as I like to say.
One of my favorite two combo pictures on the coaching education standpoint is being to present at one of the same conferences at Rob Taylor's event. It was kind of like Under Armour, ran, and it was a really cool conference. And I spoke. There's a picture of me speaking and you taking notes, and then there's a picture of you speaking and me taking notes. and it's comical because there's other people in the room that weren't taking notes, but yet that they want to come train with us or they want to come learn from us, and it just doesn't make sense. It's like when you're at an event like that or even something like this, shoot an email out to the coach and say thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's as simple as that, and as simple as reaching out, like you said. The technology of today allows us to be able to do that. Like, boom, right there, I can reach out to you. You can see it and everything.
It's so easy nowadays. If you had it a lot harder, I had it a lot harder as far as connecting with coaches. But, I wanted to connect with Martin Rooney. So what did I do? I drove to New York and connected with Martin. That was the only way I was going to go learn from somebody who I thought did an amazing job in the combine and basically I needed to learn from. I wanted to learn from Mark Verstegen. I had to go drive up and go connect with him. If I didn't do those things, I wouldn't be where I was, Ian King was presenting in a different country, and I wanted to go and see him, so I drove my butt up and freaking went to a different, country just to see somebody speak that I looked up to on the education standpoint. If you're not willing to do that, you're not willing to put the time in. So, I have a completely open door policy. Anybody is welcome into these facilities. Let me know. Set up a time. We'll set up a time for you to come see us. But interesting enough, what I do when someone walks in these buildings, so if they hear this, they want to come check us out, they're welcome to do it. But I let them coach my athletes. I actually say, hey, you're more than welcome to. And the reason why is because, number one, I want to learn too. If somebody walks in the building, I want to get something out of it as well. But I also think it's good because if somebody else is coaching my guys, I get to then take a different view of it and then have perspective on the way they adhere coaching from a completely different style that maybe doesn't understand our curriculum. So I welcome anybody that's watching this. Come on down to Northern Virginia, Washington D.C. area, and you're gonna have there's 20 freaking athletes an hour coming into these buildings, and you're gonna be able to work with some of the best athletes in the world. Come on down. Just understand that I'm gonna put you to work. And I think that's what people are afraid of.
No, I agree with you. I think you're 100% right. It's a great profession to be in. I always tell them it's the best profession to be in, but you got to be willing to put the work in at all times. You know what I mean? You got to be willing to go out there and reach out to people, drive places, call people, email, whatever, just to get people, and get their insight into what you can do. Coach,
so I'm gonna kind of jump this on you, and I say, hey, listen, you are a speed guy. I know that your speed and agility work is phenomenal, and your performance side. Let's go tactical and let's talk speed, because I think that we could really help some people that have some questions for us on the speed side. So if you have any speed questions, I mean, obviously people want to know the secrets of that 40-yard dash. I mean, the secrets is freak genetics, but it also is good training. So I'd like to get into some of that stuff.
Yeah, I love that stuff, man. That's my favorite thing to talk about. Where do you put, everybody breaks it down. I've talked from people too, who've been at Parisi and stuff like that, and they have a linear day, lateral day. How do you break your speed down, with your athletes? Say I'm coming into you and I'm going to come to you 3 times a week. I'm an athlete, a high-level high school athlete getting ready for college. How do you break that athlete down to get them ready for that next phase, that next level?
So again, as coaches, what are we? We're the bridge between point A and point B, right? And if right now point A is a 4.6 and point B where they need to be is a 4.3 or a 4.4, and that's the moneymaker. So I need to be the bridge to make that happen. And that's the same thing for the pro agility and those other combine tests. So I need to analyze kind of what the athlete's strengths are and what their weaknesses are and what makes them be able to do those things. I would say we don't necessarily have a linear day and a change of direction day or a lateral day. Now I do break them up. I mean, we do have a linear speed day or an acceleration day. We do have a change of direction day. We do have kind of an explosive power day, which is horizontal power and then and vertical power as well. And then we have a kind of a game speed day. So we do have that broken up in our curriculum, but it's actually kind of all pushed together and then broken up into different segments with our older athletes. And the reason why is I believe that you got to do it kind of every day to get good at it. And I think reactive training is something that is completely missing in the speed world right now. Nobody's talking about kind of visual ignition and the ability to react to things and how quick that reaction matters. I mean, you watch the Olympics, I mean, it will tell you people are trying to get a jump on the gun because if they do that, they don't need to be as fast. And it's the same thing with, the way we move. If we move with intent, we're going to be able to, put a lot of force in the ground the right way. But if we are able to react quickly, we're going to be able to have a jump on that other player, which in turn becomes what you consider agility or the ability to react and change direction. So we're going to work on all of those things throughout, the week, so to speak. But, the way I do break it up is I focus on, acceleration work first. I focus on change of direction next before I focus on top speed. And when I talk about change of direction, it's all about position first. So, we believe in, kind of a 3-layer approach, just like our lifting is position, pattern, power. And I believe most of the coaches watching this understand that. In the speed side, it's the same thing, but we believe it's technique, tempo, then speed. And that's how we break down all of our movements. So, and we break down all movements into that category. So the first thing is technique. So what is specifically the arm mechanics or the foot strike and the sequence of all of those movements in order first, and where do we want everybody to be aligned from their head to their foot strike to their position and their posture, all the way to where their eye contact point is, and then go into how deep their breathing needs to be, because I think that is like at the next level with some of those athletes. So we take that from a technique standpoint. After we move from technique, we move into tempo, and that's basically building a rhythm. And that rhythm and coordination is then built up. Once the athlete is able to do it kind of, just very naturally, where it looks very fluid. And you'll notice this. You'll see guys just kind of on the track doing A skip or B skip, or they'll do a bunch of things going backwards, and you'll go, okay, that's an athlete, because you can see them move. What you'll notice is when they're able to do that and it's just so rhythmic and it looks so natural and so fluid, then you can start really working on the speed side of things, because they're going to be producing, forces into the ground at the right angles, and it's not going to be something they have to think about. See, when you have to think about speed, you slow down, because the first trigger goes here. Speed is all about turning things on and off very quickly. So I'm building a rhythm and I know that my body strikes the ground in a certain spot, then now it's just a matter of intently striking that ground, intently firing back, intently getting at that angle. And by doing those things, then you're able to kind of build up on the speed side of things. So for every movement, we break it down: technique first, then tempo, then speed. So if we're talking change of direction, technique is actually how to get out of the cut first versus how do you get into the cut. Just like I know, because I've you and I have talked a lot, is you do a lot of deceleration mechanic work before you do some of the speed stuff, because you want to make sure the athlete is safe. Plus, you also know that's going to help strengthen the same muscles that are going to help them accelerate. What we do is we focus on that cut first, and then we actually put the athlete in that cut, and then we get them out of there. See, when you add speed to anything, it's going to expose some of the limiting factors, and we want to make sure that we make sure the athlete could do it very statically first, then through a slower motion, and then add some speed to it.
Excellent. I like how you break that down, how you really get into that part of it and stuff like that. You talked about game speed. Give me something that you guys do game speed wise, technique wise and stuff. Because I love game speed stuff. Then it's different than your, maybe your change of direction stuff.
I'm laughing because I'm gonna get a bunch of emails from coaches and say I can't do that. I'm a football coach, or I'm at a high school. I can't do that. We play dodgeball, but we do it with tennis balls because they hurt and things hurt. Kids move faster. I like obviously my favorite quote, being from dodgeball is if you could dodge a wrench, you could dodge a ball. But if I give a running back a ball in his hand and I say, hey, you're let's say 8 yards away from me, and I'm a linebacker, I got to go inside out on that hip, and I got to put my head on the ball and then strike through him. His job's to not let me do that. So as a defensive player, I have to visually see him. As an offensive player, he's able to kind of predetermine his first cut. His second cut is then reactionary. So his direction is predetermined. His second and third movements is all based upon reaction. A defensive player's first step is reactionary based upon scheme. So when I understand that from a sports standpoint, then I bring it into the training. How can I do that safely without pads? And I back up 20 yards away. I give the running back a ball, and I throw a bunch of tennis balls at him. And if he gets hit, then too bad. So, I would say I would love to, last year, my combine director was like, hey, let's go play paintball. The guys would love it. I'm like, I'm not doing that. These guys are too competitive, and I also know I'm going to get lit up. Those guys are going to just, hit Cav and be like, dude, I'm going to tear you up. So I don't want to do that. But I find that, look, tennis balls are, they're going to give you a little bit of a bruise. They're going to make you man up a little bit. But that reactionary stuff is key. I throw ping pongs at our guys. It softens the kids' hands. It makes them kind of look at things. I would challenge you to Google Rio Olympics table tennis and slow it down and watch the eyes track the ball as fast as it does. The eyes literally look like they're cross-eyed because they're so focused on that point. If you could get an athlete that doesn't need to have that ability, create that. Everything else becomes enhanced. Everything opens up. The world becomes a lot easier to see. Just like, when the athletes go from, the college level to the pro level, they say the game's so fast. And then 4 or 5 years into it, they're like, everything's easy to me. And all these rookies are thinking that everybody's flying around. And to the veteran, things are just, moving. I mean, look at Ray Lewis at the end of his career, Zach Thomas at the end of his career, Brian Urlacher from a defensive standpoint. These guys, they were physical specimens. I mean, Urlacher's a monster, Ray's a monster, but Zach's a short guy, but he watched film more than, most quarterbacks. And, from a reactionary standpoint, he studied so he knew what to see. So he had to enhance those qualities so everything slowed down to him. And if you could enhance your visual ignition, you could, you're cognitively, you're going to be able to make a reaction quicker, and you won't need to have more power to kind of overcome for maybe your lack of ability to react. So, it's things like that we do, I think, are game changers in the process.
How often do you throw that stuff in? You know what I mean? Because you don't want to do it all the time.
We do it every day for a very short period because I believe it's fun. It increases the energy in the building. And when you increase energy and you have competition, that allows for adrenaline. See, going back to like the adrenaline that happens at combine or pro day, or even at a tryout, or even during a game. Everybody knows those butterflies you get before kickoff. You want to kind of train yourself every day here. This is where you are, and during every training session, you kind of push the limit, right? So next training session, you push the limit. You're going to drop back down a little bit, but if you keep pushing the limit, what it's going to end up happening is instead of during game day, you kind of bust through and then you just completely crash and you fatigue or you get hurt. See, if people train you past that, that's when you tear a hamstring or that's when something happens. But if you keep pushing that limit every day, during a game day, you'll never get there because adrenaline is going to take you from your conditioning level to your peak, and people don't take that into account. And so we want to do it every day, but we want to do it kind of during a short period. We don't want to make that long. So I mean, it might only be like 4 or 5 minutes, but you play tag. We play thinking games in the beginning of our workouts. We play games at the end that are more competition driven.
Okay. All right. And I like that. I think that's definitely very helpful with that kind of stuff in there. When you talk about, I love acceleration, deceleration, all that kind of stuff. How far do you break that down? You could break down these patterns to be, almost minute, when you really can get into it. How far do you break it down with your athletes? Because, I think a lot of young coaches out there, just because you get a college kid that's unreal athletic ability, they don't really always have the fundamentals down, what they really need. They get skipped over.
I'll start with this. A good athlete knows how to get out of a bad position. A great athlete never gets in one. So if we know that, right, because they're just natural, they understand how to cut, they don't understand how to move, it's so fluid. We also know that every athlete is going to come to us with a different ability physically and also a different mental willingness to learn. Some athletes like to just kind of be, I'm just with a bunch of dudes and we work out, right? Like they want to go down to the Floridas of the world. Because I was down there, right? We were just a bunch of dudes training, and then pack on biology, pack on science, pack on all this education, and then we started to make some sense out of things. But you could go anywhere, you could just be a bunch of dudes and a bunch of bros, go out and train and work out and think, hey, I got to work out. And then there's a group of athletes that say, you know what, I want more. I want to understand that. I want to understand maybe why I'm doing this because I think that it will enhance or it will increase the likelihood of me making that team, or it might increase the length of their stay in their career that we know is very short-lived to begin with. So the difference between them playing three months at the pro level or 3 years is a retirement. The difference between them playing 3 years and a decade means they don't have to work another day in their life. But you play 2-3 years in the league, based on most of these kids' spending habits, they're going to have to do a lot. So I look at the mentality of the athlete. If the athlete is willing and open to wanting to learn more, then I'm going to really break it down. And I think there needs to be a base level of movement education because an athlete needs to understand that there's a difference between right and wrong movement. And the difference is vulnerability of health. And after that, if there's no risk of them getting hurt and it's just a performance issue and they don't want to learn, then that's up to them. But if it's on my reputation for the combine, then I need to force it to them and really get through them however I need to. But I do break it down very detailed. I will talk about, just foot strike for the sprinting for a second, just to kind of break down how much I go into the detail. We will take our shoes off with our athletes, and I will educate them on how an athlete's foot strikes the ground and where they are losing force based upon the osmization phase of when it strikes to when it releases, and how that is going to dictate both the angle into the ground, the amount of force they're able to produce, the length between each stride, and how their other parts of their body are going to compensate because of that foot strike and that roll. Most people don't understand this, but if they looked at like jaguars and tigers and they watched them run, they strike the ground on the ball of the foot, but on the outside. And then as the foot strikes the ground and releases, the big toe that should be up when it strikes hits the ground and smacks the ground and then grabs and then rips up. And what happens is coaches are teaching run on their toes or run on the balls of their feet, and that is good for some coaches, like balls of your feet, foot strike. But for some athletes, they just strike the ground, and then their foot just is so – we want stiffness, but we want it to recoil and bound. So what happens is that they strike the ground, but then it doesn't do anything. So it's just boom. So these guys that are like lead foot guys, that's because their foot's not moving, and that means that their toes aren't moving. So you want to take them from foot strike to here, to this like freaking brick foot that's unathletic, the guy that just dunk, heavy foot guy, to the guy that's got a little bit of a bounce on the step, that's just dorsiflexing, to the guy that's actually ripping into the ground, and then you're getting turf flying backwards and up. So that's at the level that I want to teach all of my athletes, because I think that's base fundamental movement. So that should be my 8-year-old, and when he's ready, all the way up to my 28-year-old guy that's been in the league for 5 to 6 years. I want to teach that, because that detail is going to be, maybe the reason why they stay safe and don't tear an ACL, or they stay safe and they don't tear a hamstring. Because, we get into movements of the hip and how the body's supposed to move. The glute has to fire first. If the glute doesn't fire first, then you're going to deal with hamstring issues every single day of the week. So I do want to get into the technique, because the technique is going to open up flaws if you don't do it right. It's just going to expose things, because you're pushing into the ground the wrong direction.
Yeah, no, I think, you definitely go over that stuff. Your, examples, your athletes that you produce that come out of there have definitely shown that. And I think that's one of the main lost things that I see with a lot of coaches, is they don't go over enough of that. They don't go over the fundamentals. They're so quick to do. And I've talked to other ones, the YouTube.
The details, we do some basic things really, really well. I mean, that's all we do. We run and we lift really, really well.
Yeah, and I think we've come to a YouTube generation where everybody gets their certification from YouTube to, hey, this is the cool next drill, or this is what we need to do. And I'm glad to see that there's more coaches out there that are trying to stress the fundamentals, because that's where it's all built. Everything's built off that fundamentals, and then you can go on, and then you can add in once they get to a certain point, hey, if you want to throw your hurdles in and stuff. But so many people start with that stuff because that's the cool stuff, and that's what kids, makes kids come back, I guess. I don't know what their philosophy is.
Look, you mentioned hurdles and cones. Look, I use them. I use hurdles, cones, and a bunch of other implements. I mean, I don't use a parachute because I think it's dumb, but I use a bunch of tools that do enhance some of the mechanisms I'm trying to teach within that athlete to create the movement I want. But what I've found as far as great coaches, they don't need any of those things. You could go out. I've seen you run sessions. You could go out and run a session with just lines and verbal cues, because you're trying to educate that athlete to understand their body. The more the athlete can understand their body, the better that they're going to be able to react to those other things on a game-like situation. So when you start adding equipment into the mix, you don't need as much education for that movement. When you start taking away equipment, you need more education and more of a coaching eye, because you have experience to then educate on how you need to do something. And I think that's what's missing, is everybody wants to go get the cones or the drills or the hurdles, because during using those implements allow them to not be as experienced coaches. But when you take that stuff out of the equation, they don't know what to do.
No, I agree. I think, I love just using the human body. Let's work it out. Let's get it going, man. You got the best machine that possibly go out in that field, and that's right there, what you're looking at in the mirror. So, what other things do you think that young strength coaches need to really focus on? I know we talked about, getting out there, getting in the trenches, like you said, and then also talking. But anything else that you really feel that they should really focus on coming up and getting into this field?
They need to be good movers. They have. If you want to be a coach that's working as an athlete, working with athletes, I would say there's two things that you have to do in order to be very good at your craft. Outside of like the development educationally from a networking standpoint, is number one, you kind of practice what you preach, right? And I know I sit here completely out of shape. What I look like is unathletic. But I could demo every single drill you give me. I could literally do a freaking snatch, and it looks good, at least for a high school, college kid standards. Maybe not some of the guys I have. I got Aaron Krisky in the building. He's an Olympian in the snatch. It's kind of hard he looks at me and laughs, because he's like, that's not how you do everything. But I could demo every single drill in the building perfectly, 2 to 3 reps. Physically, with my spine injuries and many other issues I have with my shoulders and 3 knee surgeries, I can't do them all the time, and I can't put a load on them that is going to maybe put a major stress on me. But I could demo every single drill and every movement in my building. And because of that, my athletes are going to mirror some of my movements. But if I move poorly, they're going to mirror those poor movements. So you have to be a practitioner. You have to go out there and lift and run and coach, because then you'll understand the book what's in the books better and quicker by doing what's in the books. Or you'll learn what coach is talking about at seminars because you went out there and did it. I challenge you, go out to just grass, Bermuda grass, maybe, in a where it's got a little bit of dew on there and it's a little wet, and you run barefoot. I guarantee you're going to see different foot strikes than you did if you had cleats on and you're on turf. Because of that experience, you're going to receive that education from the books or from the seminar differently than if you just never went out and did it. A lot of these coaches don't know what it feels like to do the drill they're coaching their athletes to do. So you have to understand what that feels like first. So when the athlete's like, hey, that's not how I feel, or this bothers me, you could give them the adjustment or correction associated with that drill. And then the second thing is, if you're working with athletes, not just performance testers, then you need to understand the sport demands and the technique. You don't need to be a complete expert in it, but you have to understand it because it does two things. It's going to allow you to relate information in your building to the athlete that is important to him. Not all athletes really care about running and lifting, but they care about getting better for their sport. So if you're able to teach them a drill and explain to them how it correlates and how it transfers, then that's going to be able to get them to open up and receive that information better. And then secondary, it's going to, that education that you have of that sport is going to allow you to view that drill differently and better. See, there's a lot of movements that we teach that are better ways to move, but in sport, they can't do that. I could get an offensive lineman to kick slide faster, but he's going to take on a freaking 290 to 300 pound guy, hit him. He needs to be in a better position anatomically to structurally support that load and that hit. That's not safe. Like what I'm teaching them to do, like hit each other, collisions aren't safe. I mean, the bottom line is we understand that. We're trying to teach a safer way to make that collision happen. So I have to understand that when I train that in my building, because you don't want to have that conflict. The minute you don't understand the technical demands of the sport, the athletes will lose you mentally.
Yeah, excellent points. Excellent points. Coach, how can anybody reach out to you? How can they get in touch with you? Like you said, you have an open door policy. Come down, you're going to make them work, which I love. I think that's fantastic. I wish, more coaches out there had it. I love it. But how can they get out and reach out to you now?
So our website is trainssi.com. You could also, all the social media handles, it's either Coach Kavanaugh or at Coach Cav. Kind of the Snapchat, I would say, would be a cool way to kind of see what's going on in our building. I'm a bit of a prankster with our guys because I'm so tough on them. So outside of that, I kind of like to have a lot of fun. So you get to see all the dumb stuff we do. And you'll realize that, hey, it's stuff that you could implement right away. It's not that super, impressive. It's just done very, very well. But, the YouTube channel, we have the Coach Cav Show, which kind of goes around all across the country and interviews and meets with some of the best athletes in the world, some of the best coaches in the world, and talks to them about their experience of what they're looking for. So if you are a coach or you're an athlete, there's a lot of information there. Now, most of my stuff is mainly driven towards the athlete because I believe, we've gotten to the point with the internet and all of these seminars that, everyone's talking to the coach, so then the coaches still keep talking to coaches, but no one ever talks to the athlete. So it's my job, I think, to kind of bridge that gap. And then at the Nikes and at the other summits and seminars, I'll be more than happy to speak kind of what's going on. And then, like I said, we have an open door policy. We're 14290, Sullyfield Circle in Chantilly. And, shoot us an email, give us a call. If you set something up and say, hey, I want to come down here and I'm in town, I do a lot of traveling. But if I'm in town, we will make sure we take care of you. We have a private chef. We have a hotel right by. We'll be more than happy to kind of host you for a day or two so you can see that. And, again, completely open door policy. There's no real secrets here. There's just, kind of the old school method of hard work and a lot of really good people that came before me from scientists and coaches that we've learned from and we've been able to implement in the building.
Coach, I think that's great. I greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to be on the summit, to educate, to inform people of what's going on, other different training concepts out there, and how you bring it, with your athletes every single time, and how you bring it, just in speaking. I can feel the passion. I can, see it, how you really enjoy doing what you're doing, and I greatly appreciate that. So thank you so much, and I know the audience is definitely enjoying it as well.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you, Coach. I think that what you're doing is great, and I know that you listening right now may or may not fully understand the value you're getting. And I'm not saying from me, but I'm saying from what Coach Bricks is putting out, because he's opening his doors to some of the top experts in the field that he's learned from and that he's helped coach as well. And I know just by that collection of really, good people and good minds, you could do some powerful things in this industry. I for a long time, one of the biggest, I'm going to tell you, you asked for advice. I'm going to tell you some of my biggest mistakes. Biggest mistake I made in the industry was when I was young and I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I was a better coach than some of the guys that came before me. And I actually still do think I was better than them, but my immaturity actually held me back. So, we talked about like the Martin Rooney's of the world or the Ian Kings of the world or the Eric Serranos of the world that I kind of learned from. I was too ego-driven to reach out to them, or even when I reached out to them, I didn't learn from. The Dave Tates of the world had an opportunity to work, and him work with me for a day, and it's like I didn't take full advantage of that because I thought I knew more than what their experience could teach me. And I think that was a very immature mistake. And what I will say now is, after seeing it for over a decade, the good coaches are still around, and some of these people are kind of falling off. You're going to see very, very quickly who knows what they're doing and who doesn't, and understand that you could learn from everybody. And I truly believe that. And Coach, what you've done is it really helped me out in my education. So I'll be on, learning as much as I can. So I just want to say thanks. But that's probably one of my biggest mistakes in the industry.
Yeah, Coach, I agree. I was the same way, at a younger age and stuff like that. Did the same exact thing. So I'm right with you. I think that was my biggest mistake. And that's why I'm reaching out to, great guys like yourself and other people out there that, just bring something different. I'm always learning. Every single time you speak, every single time I watch your Coach Cav show, which I love, which I'm appreciative that you actually started coming out with that. You definitely, it's well overdue. But I learned something, you know what I mean? It might be something small, but I take something, from that. And I think that's one of the great things, that if you really want to continue to progress in this profession, that's one of the things you need to do.
Mandatory requirement for any person that works in my building. They have to read the book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I think it will be a very good, I'm sure most of you guys have already read it, but I think it will be a very good recommendation for any young strength coach.
Yeah, I agree. I read it many, many years ago, but I agree. Awesome, Coach. So, Coach, thank you, man, so much. I appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you're a busy man, always working. But I thank you so much for educating myself especially, but everybody else listening today.
Absolutely. Thank you, and be your best, man.